Hey YouTube, welcome back to MK3 Supra. So I had initially started this video hoping to fix the code 52 that I had on my car, thinking I just needed to redo the wiring because it's a common issue with these cars for the knock sensor specifically. And as I got into it, I realized I needed to replace the knock sensor itself, and that ended up being a pretty I would say intrusive job. I had to get pretty far in, or I had to take off the entire air intake manifold. And so this is kind of a guide on how to replace a knock sensor as well as remove the air intake manifold. And there's a few things about even doing like an alternator and that kind of thing in there. So yeah, I didn't leave every step that I had in there, but I at least talked through a lot of what I did. Hopefully this is helpful for somebody. Yeah, or at the very least interesting. If you have any feedback for me on this, feel free to share it. I am gonna go ahead and share like basically the video of me kind of trying different things and things not working and that kind of thing. Hey guys, welcome back to MK3 Supra. Today we're gonna attempt to handle the other check engine code that I had. So my previous video I took care of code 51, which is the throttle position sensor. Today we're gonna do code 52, which is knock wiring. It's a knock wiring fault. Now, easy to sounds a little scary to have that code, but from what I can tell, that's specifically not a code saying that the knock sensors are detecting knock. That is a different code number. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but this one is specifically saying that the ECU cannot detect anything from the knock sensors. I think as the engine's running, there is naturally some noise that the ECU picks up from the knock sensors, and this code is saying, hey, we can't get that, or they're shorted to ground. And so it's a pretty common issue. One of the things on my channel that I want to do is I want to find solutions to things that maybe are I have to find a different solution for than what the conventional method has been to fix. And so the conventional way to fix this is you call up the Toyota dealer and you get new knock sensor connectors, and then you use that connector with some type of shielded cable and you run it to your ECU. Toyota is no longer selling knock sensor connectors, and so have to try a different method. So what I got here is just the eBay variant. It's definitely different from the Toyota option. The Toyota option does not come with any type of pigtail, and this one has a pigtail. But if we can make it work, we can make it work. Now, one of the nice things about me having an extra engine is I could use it to test if a sensor like this is going to work before I get too deep into the weeds on this. So let's try that out. Okay, so the knock sensor is right here. Let's see. Oh man, not even close. Well, wait, hang on. Yeah, not even close. So I need to send this back to eBay, because yeah, there's no way that's going on there. All right, well, then we're gonna have to try a different method. So I thought I'd go through the process of kind of diagnosing this. So the first thing I want to do, I got the service manual here. And the nice thing is this is specifically for 87. If you have 89 plus, your ECU is different, and so this will be different. This one's also for the 7M GTE, but the manual has the same diagram for the 7M GE. So the first thing you need to do is on this diagram, so this is for the EFI system, okay? You need to find the sensors you're looking for. So knock sensor 2 and knock sensor number 1. So The GT has 2 of them. The non-turbo does not. That only has 1. So then you follow this line until you get to here, which is basically the bar for the ECU. Okay. And so yeah, you see knock 1, knock 2. And so then this number out here is the pin number for that these connect to. Okay, so knock sensor 1 connects to pin 11, knock sensor number 2 connects to pin 10. Now that's not enough information because there's going to be a lot of pin 11s and pin 10s in here. You know, in fact, there's a pin 10 right there. So, but if you look at this, it is in the area for connector T. Okay, so these 2 sensors connect to pin T, 10, and 11. Okay, and that could be the W. I believe that's a color. So that's just saying the wire is white, I guess. And so then what we do, if you go to the next page, this will show if those pins have either a meaningful resistance from anything or voltage associated with them. I've looked, I cannot find either of these, which makes sense. Knock sensor should not be putting out voltage unless, you know, they're getting signal. And there definitely should not be any resistance between them and anything else. And so then what you do is you go to this side, which has all the different connectors, okay? And you find the connector with your letter, and so right here is T, and then the number is 10 and 11, so it's going to be these 2 on connector T, which that's going to be one of the ECU connectors, so one of the connectors that comes off of the ECU. So we'll have to kind of, you know, look around. It looks like it's the smaller of the 2 connectors, and so that, because, you know, these are the 2 main ones. I actually haven't looked closely at the ECU. These might be connected to something else, or it might be on the ECU. I'm not sure. But yeah, out of the 2, at least bigger connectors, it's the smaller one, and then it's 10 and 11. So let's go ahead and unplug the ECU and see what happens. Before you unplug the ECU, do what we did last time with the when we were doing the throttle position sensor. Disconnect the battery. Okay, that's actually more important that you do that when you disconnect the ECU than what we were doing with the throttle position sensor. All right, so we're in the car. We've got the glove box off. If you want to see how that happens, just you know, send a message or make a comment. I can show you how to take the glove box off. Now we have. Let's see if I can get a good shot. All right, so this is Toyota for the win, honestly, because I don't know that every manufacturer I've seen does this. On this label, it says which clips are which as far as number of pins. So as I said, it's the second biggest one, so 18 pins. Here's our connector. So got my multimeter. Switch it to resistance. So first off, know that this is not a perfect test. This is me kind of trying to see if I can somewhat identify or have an idea of which knock sensor is bad. Because yeah, I don't know how easy it's going to be to replace both of them, so I might just settle for replacing one for now. Yeah, and so I want to see if it is obvious which knock sensor the wiring has failed. And I'm really checking that to see if one of these has shorted to ground. I'm not really going to try... If one of them has not shorted to ground, I'm going to replace the wiring on both of them, because I don't really have another good way to check it otherwise. Okay, and so now, as a reminder, here's the picture of our connector. And it's going to be that bottom corner, okay? Sometimes it is easy to get the corners mixed up. So if I get a wonky reading, then I'll try the opposite corner. But it's definitely on the bottom row, and it should be all the way to the left. So let's see. And I might have to turn off the camera if I can't. Oh, I got it. Okay. So let's see what the meter says. Okay, so that one is open. And that one is open as well. Okay. So not obvious. All right. So I went and poked around, looking at my knock sensor wiring, and in the process, I realized it is not actually the wiring's the issue. That's my knock sensor right there. It is sheared completely off. So this is a very different repair. I actually need to replace the knock sensor itself. I'm gonna see if I can get a zip tie and zip tie it to this bar, this mount, I guess that is. So I have it handy, and then need to get myself a new knock sensor. Now, I mentioned earlier, one of the nice things about having a spare engine is you can test fit things. The other nice thing about having a spare engine is you have spare parts. So I am going to see if I can't get one of these knock sensors off. All right, so I got the knock sensor out. Wasn't in there too terribly tight. The tricky part was, in order to get it out, I needed a 1 1/16 inch socket, deep well socket. Yeah, my metrics top out at 24 millimeter, and that was not big enough. So, getting the old one out now is going to be a bit of a pain, I think. But we're gonna see what we can do. So I can kind of barely see it right there, if I duck enough. But yeah, it's kind of right there. If you see my starter, the thing with the all those little wires coming out of it, it's right in front of my starter. And yeah, it's very much underneath the air intake. So the process, what we're gonna do, I'm gonna disconnect the 3000 pipe, disconnect the throttle valve, disconnect the brake booster, and then basically the bolts holding it on, and I'll disconnect this as well. I'm not really sure what that is. And disconnect the idle air control valve as well, and then just see if I can pull it off. You know, anything that's holding it on. If something doesn't want to come off, then I might just disconnect all the bolts and see if I can just move it out of the way enough to where I can get to the valve, or get to the sensor. So, all right, so I've now gotten my air intake free. Now, if you are like me and you are saying, hey, I'm wanting to disturb as few parts of this thing as I can and get it off, and you're looking at some of these bolts on there that are very clearly mostly there just to hold something on, and you're thinking, I probably don't need to take that off because it's just holding, you know, a bracket on there or whatever. Maybe I can skip that. You're wrong, okay? All right, so I'm gonna jump in here and correct something that I did wrong, and correct it before I tell you guys the wrong information, so that if you're following along, you're not gonna do the wrong thing. What I found out, so all these screws need to come out except for these two, okay? I took them out, and then when I was putting everything back together, I discovered I did not need to remove these. And it actually kind of caused a little bit of a problem, because something got stuck in between this. That could have not had been an issue because it was attached to here. So this, on my car at least, I don't know if this is a aftermarket modification or not, but on my car, this is a ground for the starter. And then there's also this clamp here, which you can put this hose in, okay? And then this one has this clamp on it that actually technically goes to this thing. So mine, it was just kind of hanging out, flying around, flapping around in the wind. But it attaches to this guy here. Okay. So if in the next part, when I tell you guys about removing these 2 bolts, ignore that. Do not remove these. You're wrong. So let's go over all the bolts that are actually holding this thing on. Now, this does not include some of the smaller bolts that are holding like hoses on or anything like that. Okay. This is just bolts holding the big air manifold to this, which is also intake manifold. I think they have slightly different names for them in a manual somewhere. But on either end, you have studs with nuts. Okay, it's pretty normal. A lot of places do that. And then you have all of these bolts. Okay, again, some of these you're gonna think, hey, that's not that important. I could leave it. These 2. So this one, so all of these bolts except for these 2 are the same size and length. Okay, so almost all of them are interchangeable for what it's worth. These 2 are holding a bracket on. Not entirely sure. In fact, actually, it's this bracket here. These 2 bolts are holding this bracket here on. Okay, it has these hoses and things. But maybe for a PCV or something. I don't know. This is holding a bracket with, I believe, some stuff for the cold start injector. And then this has the ground for the starter. Okay. So you will need, so, I mean, this is the other side of this. I don't have the, an extra of the second piece that comes off of this. And so this is the piece that it bolts to. And as you can see, all these bolts, because all these bolts are here that you're looking at, that means they are through bolts. Okay, they will need to come out in order for you to get to that part. Hey, wanted to throw in there because I didn't say it in a video, or at least that I could find. In order to get to the nut that is all the way at the front, you need to remove the alternator. So that's not very hard to do. Alternator comes out in with basically a bolt and a nut, or basically with 2 bolts. I did break one of the bolts, but it wasn't a big deal. I was able to get a replacement one at the hardware store. I removed the brake booster, which is just this screw right here. Ended up dropping one of the washers, but that's okay because I only dropped one of them. I still have the other one, so I can get a new one. And then I ended up disconnecting the cold start injector, and that ended up being a good thing because this thing is gross. I have been having some slow starts sometimes when it's cold, so that would do it. That absolutely would do it. Well, now we'll see if we can actually get to what we came here for, and that is the knock sensor, which you can kind of see right in there. All right, so I'm gonna see if I can get a socket on there and break that loose. All right, so I've now gotten the knock sensor in. All right, it took a lot of trial and error, a lot of finagling about, going by feel, not by sight. But I now have the knock sensor in and plugged in. Okay. So here's a couple things that I found helpful. Okay. First, obviously, removing that air intake helped a lot. I could actually get in there. You could even see the knock sensor a little bit. With it being broken, it's kind of hard to see because you're missing the end of it, but I was able to see it. The other thing is, even after I got it off, I still was not able to turn it very easily. And so what I had to do was, well, what I did was I got a 27 millimeter wrench, box end wrench. This is $10 off Amazon. Generally not how much I would spend for a single wrench, but for a wrench that kind of has a special job, you know, or a tool that has a special job, I would certainly pay that. So it made it a lot easier. The alternative solution is remove the starter. Because of how close the starter is to the sensor, even with the end of it off, I could not get a socket on it at all. Yeah, I mean, my sockets are big. It's not like they're small sockets, but yeah, even like this 1/16 inch socket, I couldn't get it on there. So I had to like basically have a way to go from the side. A box end wrench, there just wasn't really enough clearance to be able to get it on there and then turn it. And so, or at least like an adjustable wrench, like this one. You might be able to kind of get it finagled in there. You know, maybe you have a smaller adjustable wrench than I do. This one technically has two sides to it, so you know, this side is maybe a little bigger than yours would be, and maybe that would give you just enough room to be able to turn it. I did not have enough room, and so I needed a different solution. So yeah, and then let me switch. And then basically where you are working is right in there, okay? I mean, I'll kind of use my camera, see if you can kind of see that green connector there. That's where the sensor is. So you basically need to assume that it is right behind the end of that starter, okay? And so when you're plugging it in, that's what you do. You go for the end of the starter, as well, or installing it, you go for the end of the starter, and then plugging it in as well. Plugging it in, it only goes one way. It looks like it goes two ways, but it actually appears to only go in one way. I grabbed another sensor from the engine just to be sure, and verified, yes, the connector, as far as I could get it, would only go on in one direction. And so you will need to kind of turn it around, finagle it. I did not hear a very satisfying click at the end. That may lead to more issues. Hopefully not. I might, you know, finagle around a little more, see if I can get it to make that click. But it also could be that it's just too far away. And yeah, but that being said, I tried pulling it off. I could not get it to come off. So, yeah, so I think I've got it on there correctly, but I could be wrong. I might be, yeah, I might be wrong on that. So, yeah, so that is my journey with this. I want to show you. So I basically sprayed some carb cleaner in here and used a rag to wipe it up a little bit, and you can see just how much I cleaned up, as well as how much I haven't cleaned up yet. I'm going to clean it better. I'm going to keep scrubbing it. But yeah, that is carbon deposits, I guess, or some crud that's in there. So I'm going to clean that up so it looks really good. And then put it back on. Another thing, so generally speaking, you should not reuse these gaskets. I'm going to, because I don't have one handy right now, and I mentioned before, right now I am kind of in keep it running mode rather than have it run really good mode. Also, this gasket up here I technically should not be reusing, but as you can see, this gasket is also broken, so I'm actually just going to use some RTV right here to kind of seal that in so it doesn't leak when the car's all back together. So I'll see you on the other side. So I had thought I had recorded this earlier when I put the air intake back on, but apparently I didn't, so I'm just going to record this with the spare engine, and I'll also run over to the car and point at stuff on the car. So in putting this back together, if you took these two bolts off, put them on before you put the air intake on, as well put the cold start injector back in the air intake. Learn from my mistakes with that. there's a bracket right here that goes like this. Okay, so the ends, you got a nut here and a nut here. Okay, and so that nut holds this bracket on. You do not want this hose to be clamped in between the air intake, or in between the air intake manifolds. Okay, if it is, this is your return hose for your fuel, and I mean, I guess that's one way to increase your fuel pressure, but not the way you want to. And so yeah, this bracket goes here. Make sure the hose does not get clamped in there. You'll have already left these, so this will be bolted to here, and you'll have a little bracket here for this hose. And then this bracket here goes like that. Okay. And then this actually bolts to the air intake manifold, which I'll show you right here. It's cold out. Sorry, I'm shivering. So this bolts right here to the side with a little screw. And then this guy here bolts right here. Okay. And then I'm not even sure what all this stuff is, but you've got a hose here, like a hard line hose right here that has 2 bolts in it, right there and right there. And then you'll want to reconnect your brake booster. This one had copper crush washers on it. And then there's a bracket here with a bolt on it. I think this is the only 14mm bolt. And then your cold start injector you want to reconnect. And I did aluminum crush washers on that based off of what was already there. And then as well, you need to reconnect this hose to this line. That's the way I did, not the other way. And then this hose here, I forgot about initially, connects to this guy right here. Okay. I think that's everything. And then reconnect your idle air control valve and your throttle. And this little guy right here, coming off the back of the manifold, connects right there. All right, so I got my alternator back on. Actually, I've got the whole thing back together, but I'm gonna give a few tips for the alternator. So first thing you need to do when you do the alternator is install this bolt on the bottom. It's the hardest one to get in because of the position it is in. And then install this bolt up here. Don't tighten either of those bolts, but just install them. And then underneath where this bracket, where that holds the alternator, is a nut. And so you're gonna want to loosen that nut. Okay, there's not really any other way around it. You need to loosen the nut, and that's gonna enable you to get the belt back on. You'll then need to tighten up the nut and until the belt is the tension it needs to be. I used one of these things, and it measured 110, which I think the spec is like 115, but it was very inconsistent. Sometimes it would say 110, sometimes it would say 90, sometimes I think it said 130. So yeah, really I should probably get a proper belt tension tool, but I'm gonna just try it out and see how it goes. The other thing that is really helpful is just totally remove the battery. Okay, don't even bother keeping it there. It just gets in the way, and you remove it, you have so much more space to get to this nut in here. Okay, and it's just a 10mm nut. Yeah, I happen to have some micro wrenches, and that helped. But yeah, so good luck with that. So the knock sensor was supposed to be rewiring, but replacement is now done. So I'm gonna start it up, take it on a drive. Normally the light would turn on after I'd been driving for like a minute or two, like get like less than a block down the road, and it would turn on. So I'm gonna record. A buddy of mine actually just donated a tripod, so I'm gonna record the startup and see how it runs, see if the timing is off, because that's one of the things the ECU does, is it retards the timing, and then we'll take it on a drive and see if the check engine light comes back on. That did not start the way I was hoping it would, as you can tell. I checked the codes and I'm getting a code 41 and code 51. I haven't looked up what 41 is yet, but 51 is the throttle position sensor that I just fixed. And I'm kind of wondering, so when I did this knock sensor recently and took just now and took the air intake off, I did clean the throttle body quite a bit because it was gross. Probably should have done it the first time, but I'm kind of wondering if when I did that I threw off the idle, threw off the idle in some way by doing that, and so I think I need to adjust the idle because of that. So I'll look up what 41 is and see if that is related to that or not. It was like when I turned it off, or when I started it, it was idling down to like 300, like really low. So I think that's probably the issue that I'm having. It should be idling like 700. So yeah, but I'm gonna go ahead and post this video, and you know, in the morning, kind of look and see what's going on. So hopefully not too big of an adventure, because I have some fun stuff coming up that I'm wanting to tackle soon. So yeah. All right, well, let's talk about how this possibly happened. So this is the knock sensor that came off of my car. This part was inside of the connector and just kind of flopping around in the wind, and then this part was still attached. This is the knock sensor that came off of my extra engine. The turbo version of this engine has 2 knock sensors, and so this is actually the second one. The first one I put on the car. So yeah, so this is my spare knock sensor, so to speak. And so when my car threw code 52, I looked it up and it said that the wiring for this often goes bad. And so that was what I was prepared to work on, was basically repair the wiring for this. But then when I went to look at it, I found the connector with this sensor inside of it. And so that made it very obvious what the actual problem was. So I'm kind of curious if anybody has any ideas how this could happen. So like I said, the sensor is literally right behind the starter. So I do kind of wonder if somebody replacing the starter could have been like an initial compromise for this. Maybe they even hit it and it like kind of just shoved it back in there like that, and we're like, hopefully that's fine. I don't know. I also mentioned when I was putting it all back together, there were a couple brackets that were not in the place they were supposed to be. I'd assume that was probably also linked to when the starter was replaced. And so maybe one of those got tangled up with this wire and managed to shear it off. I'll also say that, this one has quite a bit of yellowing. It actually also looks a little green. This one also has some yellowing. I don't recall the one I put on there being yellow. I think that one was gray. So I don't know if there's like a kind of a over time compromising that this happens. this feels like ceramic on here, like this material. In here, actually feels more like metal, but it might be ceramic. This is definitely metal. Yeah. When I first started, well, when I first noticed, because I had 2 engine codes and I hadn't looked them up. It took me a while to get to where I had time to look them up. When I first noticed the engine timing being off, which basically when the engine gets this code, it retards the timing to protect the engine, because the engine's not, or the ECU isn't sure if the engine is knocking or not. And so when I first noticed that the timing was off was probably about 3 weeks ago. And I had not, well, since I had owned the car for the last, several months, I had never touched anything on that side of the engine outside of maybe just looking around. I hadn't affected anything. And so I don't think I did anything to break this. So yeah, I don't know. Just kind of curious if anybody has any ideas on what they think might have happened. Share them in the comments. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you in the next one.